Thanks, guys. Yeah, it's your favorite fantasy football duo that you either don't know about or know about. We will be your favorite by the end of this one. Johnny Game Time Hicks and Big Travy over here. We are the Fantasy Whisperers.
Yes, we're back again. We're back again.
Hey, let's pump up the volume.
Right here.
But we're going to give you our insight, a little bit of a fantasy twist, some daily nuggets here, as well as what we think about these games. And this is, ideally, Johnny, the best weekend for playoff football that there is. It's Championship Sunday.
Yeah, man, I'm super excited for both of these games. They should be very, very good. We got the best four teams still available. And, I mean, some could argue Tennessee is not one of those teams. But we love Cinderella stories, and so we're going to break down what those games are right now, who we like, who we don't like.
Maybe you could have argued that for Tennessee coming into the playoffs, right? But then they've slayed two dragons in both the Patriots and the Ravens now. So if you couldn't respect them before, you definitely got to give them their due diligence now.
Well, is it really Tennessee, or is it the Tennessee Derrick Henrys? Is that who is slaying?
Great point.
Teams? All right, so let's just jump in here for this first game. It's going to be the morning game or the afternoon game. Tennessee Titans versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Big Travy, over under 53. Kansas City is favored by 7 points. However, this was a different story back in Week 10 when these teams faced off before. The end score was 35-32, and Tennessee actually won that game. Now, Derrick Henry had a monster game in that game as well. He had 188 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, and we expect Derrick Henry to keep steamrolling, or is that going to change this weekend, Big Travy?
I have seen this Kansas City defense turn a page, so to speak. They haven't been as susceptible through the air, but they're still not a team that's going to be, completely dominant against the run. I haven't seen anybody stop Derrick Henry over the last, 2 years and some change. If you look at what he's been able to do, I mean, the double stiff arm against Earl Thomas, that has been immortalized on the internet right now. So we understand what he's going to do there. And Tennessee may be the team out of all 4 of these that knows what they want to do the most. They want to pound you with Derrick Henry and keep the game close and pound you some more with Derrick Henry. And so for me, I think Derrick Henry is, of course, the most expensive back left of these daily backs that we have. But that's, he's probably the most sure bet of all the skill positions that you could go with, because I don't think Kansas City is going to bring you a bunch to be able to stop what he's been able to do.
Oh, absolutely. You look at what Kansas City has given up on the ground, 4.9 yards per carry. That's 28th in the league, and 128.2 yards per game. That's good for 26th on the ground as well. So I do expect Derrick Henry to get a lot of volume here, and that will be the game plan for Tennessee. That's been the game plan for the first 2 weeks of the playoffs. It's going to continue to be their game plan. They come in with one of the best offensive line ranked by Pro Football Focus, and so if they're going to win this game, they need to keep the ball away from Pat Mahomes. And how you do that? You run the ball and you keep giving it to Derrick Henry. Now, what's going to be interesting here, Travis, is Tennessee is actually 8-0 when Derrick Henry rushes for over 100 yards. So that's the magical number that Tennessee is going to try and get to. Now, that's not been a problem for Derrick Henry these last few weeks. He's been averaging over 150 yards on the ground per game, but that is what they are going to need in order to remain in this game. And then also you look at what Tennessee does, on the defensive side. They're pretty good on the defensive side too. So Pat Mahomes is going to have his plate full here. But what are you looking for on Kansas City side? Now that we talked about Tennessee, who you're are you starting real quick? Are you starting any wide receivers? You like AJ Brown or Tajay Sharp or
I think it's just a little too inconsistent as week to week what you're going to do. I do like AJ Brown's value, and he's been able to attack opposing defenses in the past, but I do think that Travis Kelce's the guy you're really going to want to go after here. Mm-hmm. You look at the last matchup, they had 10 receptions, 134 yards, and 3 touchdowns against this Tennessee team. And really, Johnny, this was Patrick Mahomes' first game back from that knee injury. So he's going to be much more loose. We saw him run for over 50 yards last week against Deshaun Watson and the Houston Texans. So I think he'll be more comfortable this week as well to be able to scramble out. And I just think when those plays break down, he's either looking to Tyreek Hill first or Travis Kelce second. We did see some interesting defense played by Adoree Jackson on Tyreek Hill last time these two played. But I do, once again, I think, this is the highest over-under of the two games. We've got Kansas City favored by 7. It's a 53-point over-under. I wouldn't be surprised if this smashed the over-under, just with the way that Tannehill's been dealing lately, too. Mm-hmm. I could definitely see a shootout here. And, give me Travis Kelce, and I don't mind paying the price for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you also look at what Tennessee is most susceptible to, and that is the tight end position. They were one of the worst, I believe it was 22nd in the league, and as far as giving up to the tight end position. Now, you also talk about this Tennessee defense, and they've been pretty good. But if you look at, Pat Mahomes, you talked about it back in week 12, just coming back, he threw for 446 yards in that game. And then you look at what they gave up to Lamar Jackson, the running back. Lamar Jackson, the quarterback last week. And Lamar was able to throw for 345 yards. Now, I understand they were way down in that game, so Lamar had to throw the ball, 70 times they dropped back to pass. So, but still, I think we all can agree that Patrick Mahomes is a little bit more efficient in the passing game there. So if I'm looking at any, options for DFS, Pat Mahomes is going to be on a lot of rosters, but he truly is he is the best quarterback that is still available, and the matchup is quite juicy there.
I would take your money and spend it on a Derrick Henry or maybe even a Kelce if you're going to have to spend on a star, because I actually think that the opposite quarterback in this game, Tannehill, has a really good shot. We talked about that over-under, 53 points. They're going to have to throw to stay in this game. I think Tannehill could deal in this game, and I think that just brings me to our prop bets now, Johnny. And so I wanted to work through some of these prop bets that are out there and kind of get your opinion on a couple of these.
Sure, absolutely.
Starting with Ryan Tannehill, over-under 236.5 passing yards.
So this one, I would go under with the 236. Now, I understand that they're probably going to have to throw the ball more, but listen, Ryan Tannehill, although I will say he is the number one in passing completion and number one in yards per passing completion right now in the NFL, but in both games he is failed to go over 100 passing yards. Now, he hasn't necessarily needed to do that. He could have to do that against Kansas City, but 236.5 passing yards. I would think he's going to go slightly under this. I would probably do it around 200 in this game.
Yeah, I think this is where we differ. I think when you look at the way that Tennessee had to attack the Patriots and had to attack Baltimore, they had to do it on the ground with Derrick Henry. I don't know if they're going to have that luxury in this game. If Kansas City jumps out early, they may have to fall into a passing attack. So I tend to disagree with you there, but I do see the logic. If Tennessee wants to stay true to who they are, they will pound with Derrick Henry and try to play game control. I definitely see that. So moving to the other quarterback, Johnny, we talked about his success, Patrick Mahomes, in the Week 10 matchup. Now he's going to be playing him here. Do we think it's over or under 303.5 passing yards for this game for Patrick Mahomes?
I honestly think this is one of the easiest prop bets of the entire weekend. I think he easily passes 303. I would say he's going to pass for over 350. I would still hit the over on that. I think he's going to have a really big game. It does seem like
he rolls out of bed with 300-plus passing yards, right? I mean, this guy just, on the flick of a wrist, racks up passing yards. So I can understand your belief there. And then if that's the case, what do you think about this next one? Over under 1.5 passing touchdowns for Patrick Mahomes.
I would also bet the over on this one. I think that Patrick Mahomes, we've seen it multiple times. I think they'll get the over under should really be over under 1.5 passing touchdowns of 20 yards or more. I think that's a little bit more intriguing of a prop bet. I would definitely hammer home on this one as well, though over 1.5 passing yards. Because I'm just not sure about the rushing game or the running game right now with Kansas City. They're dealing with a lot of issues there, and I just think that they will just allow Patrick Mahomes to kind of go insane with the passing there. How about yourself? Would you go over or under on that one?
I'm going to go over. I think it's hard to bet any kind of under stat on Patrick Mahomes. You maybe could have seen it last week when Houston jumped out big on them, and they looked like they were frazzled. They were dropping a bunch of passes, and in the blink of an eye, Johnny, they ended up winning this game and scoring 20 more points than the Houston Texans and shattering the over-under in that first half. So yeah, give me, over. I'd say he gets 2.5 or 2 to 2.5 touchdowns in this game, probably 3, just with the way that he continuously shocks us each and every Sunday. On the other side of the ball for the wide receivers, I want to talk about A.J. Brown. Right now, that over-under for 62.5 receiving yards. Personally, Johnny, I think he hits the over on this, but it kind of goes with the way I see this game playing out. I see it hitting the over. I see it being a shootout a little bit by the time the game's over. And I think Brown can get to 70, 75 yards in this game.
Yeah, I have as much confidence in any of the wide receivers. It would be A.J. Brown for Tennessee. I do think he can hit this, and most likely it's probably going to come on 2 or 3 receptions because he is that big play guy. But I do like A.J. Brown. I like what he's looking like. And if you have to take a stab, this is a guy that I don't mind taking a stab in DFS. He's a little bit cheaper. The risk is higher for sure, but not as many people with the plethora of elite wide receivers that we have left in the game today or on this Sunday. I think a lot of people might leave A.J. Brown off of their starting roster, and I think that might be a place you can capitalize on.
I agree. We want to move to the next pass catcher on the other side of the ball, which would be Tyreek Hill, Johnny. So Tyreek Hill is 76.5 yards as his total here. Do you think he gets over or under this mark?
I think he's going to go over this mark. You look at what he did last time they played. He had 11 receptions for 157 yards and a touchdown. I do think that Tyreek Hill will catch at least one monster pass this weekend. It will be a big play, and so I think he easily hits this over because I don't think that Tennessee can shut down Tyreek Hill. I think that they can slow him down a little bit, but 76.5 total reception yards is you talked about Pat Mahomes rolling out of bed and getting 303 or over 300 passing yards. It kind of seems like Tyreek Hill kind of rolls out of bed and automatically has like 60 receiving yards every game.
Yeah, I think it's just about the narrative you're telling yourself about this game, Johnny, right? Like, do you think Tennessee wins this game? I don't personally.
Right.
And if they don't win this game, do you see a game where Kansas City wins and their studs aren't balling out?
Right.
I just don't see them winning a game on the back of Damian Williams in this game, who's not, maybe not the guy that gets the love. I think it's going to be Tyreek Hill. I think it's going to be Pat Mahomes. And going to our next prop bet here would be Travis Kelce, whose over-under is 78.5 receiving yards. I actually think he could be a push or under on this, but get a touchdown or two. And I think that the yardage will come from these wide receivers because I just, like you've said, like Tyreek Hill said in his presser this week, there's not anybody really on the planet that can guard these Kansas City wide receivers, especially Tyreek Hill.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think that for me, Kelce, I'll take the under on his passing yard or on his receiving yards, but I do like him to score in this game.
Wow, you're going to go under? I would disagree. I think he's going to go over this 78.5. Again, we talked about how Tennessee's giving up the most to tight end position. I think that Kelce will be targeted early and often, and I think that he will get over this 78.5 receiving yards. I would go somewhere around 90, and I do think he will get multiple touchdowns.
All right, so our last prop bet for this game before we give our game picks, we have Derrick Henry over under 100 rushing yards. You talked about the stat at the top of this show, or the top of our segment here, Johnny. Tennessee is 8-0 when he rushes for over 100 yards. So what do you see right here? Do you see that streak breaking, or do you see Henry getting under? What's your take on this one?
All right. Well, I don't want to tip my hand on my who I think is going to win this game, but I certainly do think that Derrick Henry can and will get over 100 rushing yards in this game. I think that will be their game plan. They will want to get him involved. They will need to get him involved. They have to keep Pat Mahomes on the sideline. In order to do that, they are going to have to run the ball. And unless the only way I don't see this happening is if Kansas City immediately gets up by 14 or 21 points and they completely have to abandon the run. I still think that Derrick Henry can rumble and tumble his way to 100 rushing yards either way. How about yourself? What are you thinking on this one? You going over or under?
I'm going to take the over as well. I think that Derrick Henry has just been an unstoppable force for the Titans, but I think that the Titans will need a little bit more than Derrick Henry this week. We'll get into that next, but I do see a changed Kansas City defense, not completely changed. They can still be susceptible to the run, which is why I like him to get over. But I think when it matters most, they'll be able to shut down the other weapons for Tennessee here. Mm-hmm. And so I do like Derrick Henry to get over 100 rushing yards. But that will bring us to our picks here, and then just kind of your betting stance on this game, Johnny. We talked about it, a 53.5 or a 53-point over under. Who you got? Who do you like? The Tennessee Titans, the Cinderella story, or the Kansas City Chiefs getting to the Super Bowl with Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes?
I think that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to win this game. I do think that does snap their streak of Derrick Henry getting over 100 rushing yards and winning the game. I think that is snapped. I do think that this is going to be a close game. The spread right now is 7, Travis, for Kansas City. I don't know if I would.
Yeah, some sites have it at 7.5.
Yeah,
too.
I don't know if I would necessarily take Kansas City with a 7.5, giving 7.5 points. I'd probably take Tennessee if I'm trying to cover the spread. But just as far as for our purposes, just going forward, I think that Kansas City will win this game over Tennessee, and it will send the Cinderella team home. Unfortunately,
man, I hate when I agree with you. Just provides for such a lame show. No, I'm just kidding. I really do like Kansas City here. I like exactly what you said. I don't think that they cover the full 7 or 7.5, even on some sites. I do think that you can smash this over under. I think that as far as I've seen, not terrible weather in the forecast. And I don't know that it really matters with guys like Patrick Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers if weather is concerned, because these guys can throw through all sorts of problems. We saw the snow game with Kansas City a few weeks back where it just didn't matter and they were throwing all over the place. Give me the over in this game. Give me Kansas City, but don't be surprised if Tennessee keeps it close.
100%.
All right, so moving on to our next game, the Green Bay Packers. My Green Bay Packers, really stoked for this game, Johnny. They are traveling to San Francisco to face the 49ers in a rematch of a Week 12 beatdown that the Niners gave my Packers. 37-8 was the final score in that game. This game has San Francisco favored yet again by 7.5 points with a 46.5 over-under in San Fran. So, Johnny, talk to me what you think, kind of your breakdown on how you see this game going, and maybe some daily fantasy deals or even some of the studs that you like to capitalize on.
So this is a very intriguing game, of course. This is a rematch of a game that we also had previously this year. Unfortunately, that game was not a good game. That was a very ugly game. But I also think that game was not the best that Green Bay could play. I think they're playing better total team football than they were back then. But when you look at that Week 12, 37-8 loss, that was pretty brutal. You look at what the Packers have right now, though, coming into this game. Packers come in with the Pro Football Focus's 6th best offensive line. The Packers' passing offense has been held to under 233 yards per game, which is not the best stat. This is kind of interesting, right, when you're talking about the Green Bay Packers, because they are flying under the radar. Most teams aren't really sure how good are the Green Bay Packers. They win these ugly games, they win these gritty games, and their record is very, very impressive, but most people don't really, most people aren't really engaged with them because they aren't like the Packers of old, right? They aren't putting up a ton of points. They aren't putting up a lot of yardage. Aaron Rodgers isn't doing everything that he was doing before. This team is way more balanced than it's ever been, and that's been very, very good. The one thing that the Green Bay Packers are going to need to do, they are going to need to get those third down conversions. Unfortunately, they struggled when they played earlier. They were 1 for 15 in Week 12. They've struggled all year on third down. They ranked 23rd in third down conversions as a team. So that is a big area.
Except for last week, which it seemed like every third down they threw to Devontae Adams. Mm-hmm. You got to think that San Francisco is going to have a plan for Devontae Adams. Maybe try to bracket him a little bit. They used man on him last time, but it really didn't matter because the game got out of control. I do see a situation where this could be a game of adjustments. A lot of familiarity on this coaching staff. You have Matt LaFleur who coached with Kyle Shanahan in multiple stops along the way. You have Pettin who had time with Shanahan on the defensive side of the ball in Cleveland as well. So there are just a lot of connections here, and it makes for a very intriguing matchup. I think you're right. Really, what can Green Bay do to kind of stop and neutralize this pass rush will mean a lot of things, including what it could mean for some of these guys that we're looking at as far as daily fantasy picks. And for me, one of the guys that I think could fly under the radar here is Jimmy Graham. He's been utilized a little bit in the last game. He had some clutch catches. I think he could sneak in for a touchdown, and I think he's probably the cheapest tight end on the market as far as daily is concerned. And so kind of my Hail Mary prayer tight end to look out for is Jimmy Graham. I think that he could attack the middle of the field with some ease here against the Niners, because if there's any weakness on that defense, it's definitely over the middle where he could kind of slip through some of the zone coverage. I think that also you look at what the Niners defense has allowed, 4.3 yards per carry in 2019, and they've allowed, over 120 rushing yards per game on average. I think that's in an area where they can be attacked. You look at Aaron Jones, you look at the success he had last week, the big games he's had against Dallas or against other teams where he's had multiple touchdowns. This guy scored 21 touchdowns on the year, Johnny, tied with Christian McCaffrey for the most scrimmage touchdowns this year. Aaron Jones is a beast, #free Aaron Jones. And I think you could, similar to Derrick Henry, where he's going to cost you a pretty penny, you can, go ahead and go forward with Aaron Jones with confidence, because I think he is going to be a big part of the Packers' game plan.
Yeah, not only rushing the ball, but receiving out of the backfield. You look at just this Green Bay Packers offense, Aaron Jones actually had the second most receptions on this team behind Davante Adams. The second best wide receiver for Green Bay was Lazard, and he had 35 receptions. So certainly think it's going to be a huge day for Aaron Jones. Love him in the DFS. I almost secretly kind of like him more than Derrick Henry, just because of the fact that he's more versatile, and I think that they're going to need to rely on him a lot more. Of course, it's hard to say that a team's not going to rely on a player more than Derrick Henry to Tennessee. But I get your point, and we talk about it all the time in the podcast. Is how much more valuable is a running back that can catch out of the backfield? Mm-hmm. And so if Green Bay wants to win this game, they're going to have to utilize Aaron Jones in that nature. And I think that's a great little sneaky call there that you like Aaron Jones a little bit more than Derrick Henry here. I do have worries on the other side of the ball. Green Bay's rushing defense against this three-headed monster. Not that I don't think any of these backs will have a chance to explode against Green Bay, but which back is it going to be? I mean, the whole back half of this year, we thought Mostert was the guy, and then just last week against Minnesota, it was back to Tevin Coleman. Does anybody on earth, even Shanahan, have an idea who he's going to be using at running back each week? I don't think so. I think it's a clear case of whoever has the hot hand, or whoever he wakes up and in the morning and decides, you know what, I'm going to throw him out there as the lead guy. And so, yeah, you're not going to be able to count on any of these running backs, but I guarantee whoever it is, if you are able to pick the right one, and he is the person that pops off, he will be the one that helps win DFS lineups for sure, because one of these three running backs is going to have a monster game because, like Travis alluded to, that is the major weakness in this Green Bay Packers defense. And so one of these one of these running backs is going to have a big game. It's just a dice roll as to who that's going to be. Now,
yeah, give me the dice roll of Raheem Mostert, in my opinion. I think Coleman's the more expensive one coming off of last week, but I do think Mostert's the more talented back right now. And I think if they roll with him, I think I'd be paying a little bit less, get some value by getting Mostert involved here. So I think we've covered this with some of our key points, X factors in the game. Let's roll on to these prop bets, Johnny, and we'll start with the man himself, the fantasy Jesus Christ, or at least he used to be, Aaron Rodgers here, over under 239.5 passing yards. I think this is a magical number here, and I'll tell you why, but I want to hear your thoughts on that over under there.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is a magical number for me as well. 239 seems to be like something that they need to get over in order to win this game. He's going to have to throw over that. Unfortunately, I don't think Aaron Rodgers gets there. I think that their game plan is going to be more on the heavy running side of the ball. And so I don't, and the fact that they also don't have a wide receiver other than Davante Adams who can consistently catch the ball, I think it's going to be a struggle for Aaron Rodgers to get over 240 passing yards. So I would go under on this one.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. You look at Aaron Rodgers over his career, and he's just not a huge yardage guy to begin with. Even in his dominant years, he just doesn't eclipse a lot of yardage. It's just not his style. You look at this game against Seattle, and he only got up to 243 passing yards, and that just barely hits this over. So I think it is a magical number. I don't know that he'll need a ton to get the job done this week if the defense can keep it close. But I will just say I think he gets over, but I think it's barely. I think he'll be in the 245 to 250 range.
Very interesting. All right.
So for our next one, we're going to go on the other side, the other signal caller here, Johnny, and that's Jimmy Garoppolo, 249.5 passing yards against this Green Bay defense that has been known to kind of let some big plays up. Do you see Jimmy G eclipsing the 249.5 mark?
Yeah, I do. I think that similar to your take on Ryan Tannehill as your, second best option to Pat Mahomes, I think that Jimmy G is actually the second best option going this weekend for DFS. I think that he's going to have a big game. He's had several, games where he threw over 250 passing yards. I think that when you look at this defense, sure, it is susceptible to the run, which I do think that they'll be able to run the ball, but I also think that it's the yards after contact that the 49ers, wide receivers are super good at, and I think that that's what's going to allow him to get over this 249.5 passing yards. And, he has George Kittle. He's got Deebo Samuel.
Emmanuel
Sanders. He's got a lot. He's got a plethora of wide receivers. And I think he'll spread the ball around, and he'll be able to get over 249.5 passing yards on this one.
All right, so moving on to the wide receivers, or at least the pass catchers on this section, we're going to go with Davante Adams, the man who was just unstoppable last week against Seattle. Let's take the look at his over-under of 81.5 receiving yards. Johnny, do you think Davante Adams gets over 81.5 receiving yards or under?
So this one's going to be difficult because he is going to most likely be lined up against Richard Sherman, who is actually having one of his best years in a long time. And so it might be a little bit difficult. But like you said, Davante Adams, it doesn't matter who you put on this guy. He is so elite. And they will put him in the slot, too, to get him away and put him in motion and things like that. So there are ways to get him open. But the main factor for me is it just comes down to Davante Adams is like the only guy in Green Bay right now that's going to be consistent. He's the one that Aaron Rodgers trusts the most. So Aaron Rodgers should look for him early and often in order to stay in this game. I'm going to say he's going to get over 81.5 receiving yards. And not only is he going to get that, but he's going to have to get that if Green Bay is going to stay in this game.
Yeah, I might be called a homer on this one, but I think Davante Adams' story is just too ripe for this game. He had an awesome game against Seattle. He's returning to the Bay Area where he went to high school. Okay, he went to Palo Alto High School over there in the Bay Area. He told reporters yesterday that this was a dream come true to play the NFC Championship game in his hometown or near his hometown. And then he also said that he'd been watching a lot of Jerry Rice film to learn how to press off of guys and make sure that he was a step ahead of guys. I mean, if you're dropping Jerry Rice's name going up against the Niners, I love what he's got going here. And you talked about it, necessity. The Packers don't have one true thoroughbred number 2 behind him. So I really love what Adams does. And I think the over-under here will be he'll smash that 81. He should get 100 yards pretty easily on Sunday. So moving on to the other pass catcher, or the star pass catcher for the Niners side of the ball, and that is George Kittle, 72.5 receiving yards. Johnny, do you think, I think he smashes this. I think he gets the over on this too. I think it's not just a knock on Green Bay, but no team has been able to stop Kittle this year. If you look at it, if Kittle's a big part of their game plan, and he usually is, I don't see a way that they can stop him.
For sure, Jimmy G is his favorite target is George Kittle. And if you look at what the Packers, similar to Tennessee, the Packers are majorly susceptible to the tight end position. They ranked 21st in receptions allowed to the tight end this year and 20th in yards to the tight end position this year. I don't expect that to change this week, and I do think that George Kittle will have a monster game this weekend.
All right, so we're talking a little bit about Aaron Jones here at the top, and we talked about, if there was a way to attack San Francisco. I think this is a very low over-under for his rushing yards here at 64.5. And so for me, I like Aaron Jones to tilt the over here. Do you think he gets over that 64.5 rushing yards?
I do think he does get over that. Again, going back to what 49ers defense, they have been given up 4.6 yards per carry That was wrong defense there. But the Green Bay Packers have been. What am I even saying? I'm going to edit this out. The 49ers have been susceptible to the run game, if anything, on their defense. So I do expect Aaron Jones to have a very big game. I expect him to be very, very efficient like he has been all year. I would hit the over on 64.5 rushing yards.
All right, and finally on the other side of the ball, Raheem Mostert is the back we'll talk about. This was the one I believe he's going to be the guy that gets fed here. I think he's the more talented guy of their three-headed monster. But, Vegas may be disagreeing. 45.5 rushing yards over under for Raheem Mostert here, Johnny. Personally, I think he's going to hit over this. I think Green Bay, as good as they've been on defense, they're not going to be able to stop this rushing attack as much as they'd like. I do think that they can limit it, but I think that Mostert will get over 45.5 rushing yards.
Yeah, I definitely think that Mostert will get over this, even if he isn't the primary ball handler, even if it is Tevin Coleman or Matt Breida. I do still think Raheem Mostert can get over 45.5 rushing yards, even if he gets 10 carries. He's been averaging over that. He's been averaging 5 yards per carry already on the season, so certainly think that Mostert has a great chance to get over this 45.5 rushing yards.
All right, Johnny. So that wraps up our prop bets for this one. So now we've got to tell the people what we think. Green Bay Packers at the 49ers, NFC Championship with a trip to Miami on the line. Who do you like here?
Unfortunately, I think the 49ers are going to win this game. I would love it if the Green Bay Packers could win this game. I would like to see a Green Bay Packers versus Kansas City Super Bowl. Unfortunately, I just think this 49ers team is just too good, and they're just playing really good football right now, and it's at home. I just think there's too much going on in their favor for Green Bay to overcome that, but certainly hoping Green Bay can upset and prove me wrong. How about yourself?
Listen, I'm a homer. I'm going to take my Packers, but I think that there's a couple X factors here, and they're both at the quarterback position for each team. There has been no quarterback other than maybe Patrick Mahomes in the last decade that's been able to tilt the field in his team's favor as much as Aaron Rodgers. And I think with Aaron Rodgers on the field, going back to the Bay Area where he also grew up, going back to a team that did not draft him and drafted Alex Smith instead, going back, and he's looking at everything and he says, this could be my last chance to get to the Super Bowl with a defense this good. I think that Aaron Rodgers has the ability to tilt this game in favor of the Packers. And then I look at the other side of the ball. Jimmy G has been known to maybe throw a couple picks here or there in crunch time. And I think with the way that Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, and now Kenny Clark for that defensive line for the Green Bay Packers has been playing, I think that could be the great equalizer. Get Jimmy G rattled, and I think the Packers win this one. I think the over-under is perfectly fine there at 46.5. And I do think the Packers are definitely going to cover 7.5. I would book that bet right now at 7.5 because I think this is going to be a lot closer than Vegas thinks.
I 100% agree with the spread. I think it's just way too much. I would be betting on that spread as well for Green Bay.
All right. Well, thank you guys for listening. And as always, you can find us on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook at The Fantasy Whisperers. We'd love to have you join the Whisper Nation. Good luck on all your bets this week. I'm Big Travy. That's Johnny Game Time Hicks, and we're out. Peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Whisperers podcast. You can hear more from John and Travis on Google Play, SoundCloud, and iTunes. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at TF Whisperers.